Israeli nuclear technician Mordecai Vanunu meets with a journalist from the British newspaper Sunday Times. He eagerly shares details with the journalist about the nuclear capabilities of the Jewish state, even showing photographs to support his claims. However, before those photos could even be printed, Vanunu mysteriously vanished. He was last seen with a woman at a hotel. Later it turned out that Mordecai was pumped with various drugs and secretly taken to Israel, where he was convicted of treason. The operation was carried out by Mossad agents, one of the most effective, secretive, and radical intelligence agencies on the planet.
It almost seemed like something out of a movie. Somewhere in London, he crossed paths with a beautiful, attractive girl. Oh, sorry. One thing led to another, and an American tourist, mutual attraction, a spark between them. And it was such a powerful spark that Mordecai, knowing he might be followed, knowing they might be after him, completely disabled all his security systems. He was so taken by this American tourist who said she was traveling through Europe and planning to go to Italy next, suggesting they might go together. So, they left, they flew off to Rome, and instead of a Roman holiday, he ended up with an adventure and a meeting with Mossad.
The then Prime Minister of the country, David Ben-Gurion, instructed the merger of two agencies, the Central Institute for Coordination and the Central Institute for Intelligence and Security, with full subordination to the Prime Minister. Mossad was formed on the basis of an organization that was involved in transporting Jews to Palestine during World War II.
No self-respecting country can function without intelligence agencies. Especially when it is constantly under the threat of hostile enemies, quite literally, from over the fence. Therefore, it was essential to know what the enemies were plotting, what they were doing, and to effectively counteract them. This is how the need for intelligence agencies arose.
Throughout its existence, the agency has been credited with numerous secret operations. However, not all of them can be attributed to Mossad. For example, when a leak of information occurs in Iran or any other Arab country, accusations are immediately directed at Jewish agents. Of course, Israelis could have left their mark in some cases. However, not in all misfortunes of their neighbors. Sometimes the accusations can even be downright absurd.
It's worth mentioning that not long ago, off the coast of the resort town of Sharm el-Sheikh on the Red Sea, sharks appeared and attacked tourists. Since such an invasion hadn't happened before. One of the most zealous Israeli haters voiced the version that these are specially trained Mossad sharks that target tourists for this purpose to cause damage to the Egyptian tourism industry. Whether this is more a matter of foolishness, imagination, or the desire of Russians, Egyptians, or anyone else, I can't say for sure. But this absurd theory is certainly making the rounds.
The first head of Mossad was the Israeli statesman Reuven Shiloah. To this day, he is considered the founder and father of this intelligence agency. If the agency's activities could be described in one sentence, it would definitely be a quote from Shiloah himself.
Arabs are the #1 enemies of the Jewish community, and professional agents must be infiltrated into Arab society. Israeli intelligence should not be limited to the borders of Palestine, it must serve as the Jewish Zionist guarantor of the safety of Jews worldwide.
By the way, Reuven Shiloah's name became known only in the 1990s. And in general, due to the secrecy of Mossad, until that time, no one had ever heard of the names of its directors. It's no surprise. Revealing the name of the head of Mossad would have left Israel vulnerable, as it had numerous enemies among Arab countries.
I think this is the nature of every intelligence agency. No one wants to expose their people. As soon as you shine a light on someone, a lot becomes clear. And there are still many people alive who will have grievances against you and will be waiting for a target to take their revenge on.
Secrecy is the primary goal of Israeli agents. Unofficially, they even have a motto: as little information as possible, as many rumors as possible. This is just about Kidon, the most secret unit of the Mossad. According to information disclosed by the Americans, this unit consists of just 3 groups, each with 12 members. They can reach any corner of the planet, and their business card is a bullet to the eye. What's true and what's fiction is not exactly clear. What is known for sure is that this is the only unit in the world officially created for physical elimination of individuals, and it is credited with at least 4 dozen operations.
Kaidan is translated from Hebrew means bayonet. This is the unit responsible for the physical elimination of Israel's enemies. It is considered one of the most ruthless structures. There have been several known cases where a group of Israeli commandos arrived under false passports in one of the countries and, in a hotel, eliminated a certain number of scientists and nuclear weapons developers. Israel neither confirms nor denies this.
Although not all successful operations are carried out by Kaidan fighters, Mossad has a complex structure with many different units, whose members have participated in various missions around the world. In 1960, a 6-year-old boy Gisele Schumacher was kidnapped in Israel. The kidnapper was one of their own, a member of the Neturei Karta organization, a movement of Israel haters. After 2 years of searching, the authorities were powerless, and the then Prime Minister Ben-Gurion turned to Mossad for help. In just a few days, the head of the intelligence agency mobilized agents from around the world, and they managed to find him thanks to a letter between a soldier and the boy's mother. He asked how the child was doing. With only his mother, agents quickly found the boy. He was in New York. In 1969, the Mossadists stole 5 SAR missile boats from the French. They outsmarted Paris so effectively that the government dismissed the military leadership. The list of Mossad's special operations is endless, with each being unique.
Mossad is unique in that it practically has no margin for mistake. Because the cost of each mistake could be the cost of Israel's very existence. While countries like the United States or Russia have a high tolerance for mistakes, Israel may not have the chance for a second strike or a second attempt.
The war had ended, and wounds began to heal. But not in the case of Mossad. A man named Adolf Eichmann, an SS Obersturmbannführer, better known as the architect of the Holocaust. His hands were stained with the deaths of nearly 4 million Jews. After the war ended, he decided to hide and cover up his involvement in the horrific atrocities.
After the war, he hid in Germany for a while. He pretended to be an officer in the SS field units. Because when the Americans captured him, he disguised himself as a lieutenant, not in the SS, but in the Waffen-SS. He escaped with a friend from the camp. Then hid on a farm, working at a sawmill. In short, the ground was burning beneath his feet, and he quickly fled to Argentina.
Under a false identity in Argentina, he lived as Ricardo Clemente. Israeli agents were able to track him down only in 1958. After 2 years of surveillance, they identified him on the street, holding a bouquet of flowers, in just a few seconds. The operation was led by the then head of Mossad, Issa Harel. Eichmann was brought to Israel, but no one intended to put him on trial. What the Israelis needed was the confirmation of his identity. Once the investigation confirmed that this man was the bloodthirsty monster responsible for millions of Jewish lives, he was immediately executed. But the most interesting part of this story is how Eichmann ended up in the hands of Mossad.
In Argentina there lived a blind man, a Jew, Lothar Hermann, who was married to a German woman, and had a strong interest in the search for Nazi criminals. So, when he heard from his daughter that she had a new acquaintance, the one who boasted that his father was a fairly important figure in the Third Reich, and his name was Nicholas Eichmann, he made the connection. He passed this information to Israel, and a Mossad team began to follow this lead.
In Mossad's history, there was a man who will long remain in the memory of the Jewish people. Amit Meir, the third director of the agency. Before his appointment, he led military intelligence and initiated the creation of Sayeret Matkal, Unit 269. This formation has nothing to do with Mossad, but it often collaborates with it. Why is this important? The current Prime Minister, Defense Minister and heads of Israel's military organizations are all former fighters of Unit 269. We'll talk more about them, but a little later.
He quickly became well known, particularly for implementing the principle of, do as I do, rather than, do as I say. While commanding various units, he rose quite high. He could have replaced Moshe Dayan as chief of staff, but due to an unfortunate parachute jump, he spent a year and a half in hospitals.
Amit Mir's rapid career led him to the position of Mossad director in 1963. Many employees resigned because they remained loyal to the previous director. However, the quick staff turnover played to Mir's advantage. He restructured the agency and introduced new operational methods. As he liked to say, if you have a small territory, you must create your own operational space to make up for the lack of necessary territory. Additionally, Mir began hiring women. He saw in them a potential that men lacked. One such example was the operation to capture Mordecai Vanunu. If it were not for the woman, the operation might not have taken place.
Women have skills that men simply do not have. They know how to listen. A light, unobtrusive conversation is no problem for a woman. Modern intelligence agencies are full of stories about women who use their gender to benefit their country. We're not talking about cases that involve sleeping with someone. We're talking about the ability to turn a man's desire to one's advantage.
It was a woman who helped Israel carry out the most daring and high-profile mission, which would later help the country win the Six-Day War. That's why her name is still unknown. Operation Penicillin, the hijacking of a Soviet MiG-21 fighter from an Iraqi airbase. It all began when the USSR started supplying new aircraft to Arab countries. The Israeli Air Force, knowing that war was approaching, turned to Mossad with a request to obtain one of those planes.
These planes had proven themselves well in Vietnam, and it was planned that they would fit perfectly into the upcoming Arab-Israeli conflict. If there was an airfield with Soviet MiGs stationed there, Soviet instructors would arrive, as well as the airfield security, also made up of Soviet soldiers, and officers and generals, responsible for training and maintaining Arab pilots and crews. The treatment of the Arabs was accordingly, they were seen as lower class.
After several failed attempts to hijack a plane, the Israelis finally succeeded in reaching. They played on the attitude towards the Arabs. They found a pilot, a Christian named Munir Ritva, who disliked his country because of his religion. The agreement with him was simple: he would receive $1 million, his entire family would be transported out of Iraq, and as soon as the last member of his family left the country and was in a safe place, Ritva would take the controls and hijack the MiG-21. The planes had enough fuel only for training, preventing flights beyond Iraq's borders. But on the fateful day he got lucky. The airfield crew filled the tank completely. No one suspected anything because Munir Ritva was a successful pilot, everyone knew him, and they never suspected that in a few seconds, the brand new MiG-21 would take off and never land again.
When he took off into the sky, within a few minutes, he changed direction because it was completely different from the task he had been given. It was a different route, one that led him towards Israel. The next half hour was tense because he was being threatened. At first, the walkie-talkie burst with threats, with surprise where you were flying. There were a lot of curses, and they kept telling him they were going to shoot him down. He turned off the walkie-talkie.
A Belgian Boeing 707 was set to fly from Brussels to Vienna and Tel Aviv. But 4 Black September fighters came to the cabin unnoticed. This is a Palestinian terrorist organization with a grudge against Israelis. As soon as the aircraft took off, the leader of the group announced the hijacking and forced the pilots to land the plane near Tel Aviv. It was just after 5 p.m. The terrorists put forward the conditions. By 9 a.m., Israel had to release 315 Palestinian prisoners, or the plane and its 100 passengers would be blown up. The country's prime minister wasted no time. Mossad agents were processing information and creating a plan for the rescue, while the Sayeret Matkal unit was preparing to storm the plane.
In the history of Israeli intelligence services and special forces, this was the first ever case of a forceful hostage rescue from a hijacked plane. The operation was led by the head of the Israeli Special Forces, Ehud Barak, the future chief of the General Staff and the future Prime Minister of Israel. Among the members of the rescue team, specifically from the Sayeret Matkal unit, was the current Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. Interestingly, he was injured during the short but intense battle.
The first thing the special forces did was deflate the Boeing's tires and drain its fuel. When the terrorists asked to have the tires inflated and food brought into the cabin, 16 Sayeret Matkal operatives were sent dressed as the crew. The operation lasted 1.5 minutes. 2 female terrorists were captured, and the men were shot. Not only did they neutralize the terrorists, but they did it in the best traditions of Israeli special forces.
Thanks to Mossad, they were able to determine who was on board, how many terrorists there were, and how many hostages. As usual, the entire assault took very little time. Interestingly, the leader of the terrorist group locked himself in the bathroom and was taken out right there. So, perhaps the first case of a terrorist being neutralized in a toilet belongs to the Israeli commandos.
Less than 6 months after the failed plane hijacking, the members of Black September decided to take revenge on the Israelis. The Munich Olympics. As Israeli athletes prepared to represent their country, 8 terrorists were planning the bloodiest attack in Israel's history at that time. The terrorists infiltrated the athletes' village and went through their apartments, simultaneously taking them hostage. When wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg tried to stop the terrorists, he was shot. And weightlifter Joseph Romano was tortured and stuffed with lead just like that. Other athletes were intimidated.
After the capture and death of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics in 1972, an operation by the terrorist organization Black September, it became clear that this could not go unpunished. The Mossad was mobilized, all connections, agents, and every possible and impossible option were put into action.
Germany assured they could handle it alone. But they couldn't. Journalists broadcasting live were allowed near the athletes' apartments during negotiations. Accordingly, the terrorists saw all the police bases. The Black September fighters killed 2 more athletes and demanded a plane and helicopter to escape to Egypt. Both the hostages and terrorists were taken by bus. As the terrorists and hostages headed to the airport, the Germans positioned snipers to swiftly eliminate the fighters. They failed. When the terrorists realized they were trapped, they began shooting the hostages at close range, and those they couldn't shoot were blown up with grenades. After all athletes were killed, Israelis responded immediately. They formed Committee X, including Prime Minister Golda Meir and Defense Minister Moshe Dayan. The goal was to kill those responsible and close to the attack. The Mossad agents compiled a list, and when possible, aimed to erase the terrorist organization Black September from the face of the earth. This operation was called Operation Wrath of God. The exact reason for this name is unclear, but one thing is certain: the terrorists faced terrible retribution.
Literally 1 year after the tragedy, 13 out of 17 terrorists were eliminated. Some were shot, some were blown up, and some were drowned.
1976 was remembered for the Israelis for the hostage-taking of an Air France aircraft. The aircraft was landed in the Ugandan city of Entebbe. 8 terrorists demanded the release of prisoners held in Israel, France, Kenya, and several other countries. The scenario was standard: if the demands were not met, all the hostages would die. Over 100 passengers were held in the old terminal of the airport for a week, with no one allowed in. Mossad immediately took action. The operation was planned in just 2 days. They gathered information, interrogated freed hostages, and decided the Sayeret Matkal unit would carry out the mission.
Mossad played a key role by assisting with communication channels and creating the conditions necessary to prepare the special forces. Mossad helped find all the documentation related to the Entebbe airport because, surprisingly, the Israelis had built that airport, and they had the documentation. It just needed to be located. Additionally, the Arabs, to prove they were willing to release people in exchange for their arrested accomplices, let some hostages go. One of those who was released was a Frenchman, a French Jew, who had once had connections with Mossad. He volunteered and gave a detailed account of what was happening, where the hostages were held, and Mossad passed this information on to the military. Together with the military, they carried out the operation.
Sayeret Matkal immediately went into action. They eliminated Ugandan soldiers who sided with the terrorists while guarding the airport. They quickly reached the hangar and secured it. The entire operation lasted 53 minutes. Sayeret Matkal soldiers killed the terrorists, rescued hostages and left Uganda. However, there were casualties. During the battle for the hostages' freedom, Yonatan Netanyahu, the current Prime Minister's brother, was killed.
The Ugandans opened fire from observation towers. The bullet pierced Yonatan Netanyahu. It hit him in the neck. It affected important, vital organs. And it was not possible to save him, unfortunately. This was tragic news for all of Israel, as he was a well-known figure. Was a handsome, young, talented warrior. And warriors are highly valued in Israel.
Speaking of Mossad in general, despite its secrecy, they often recruit through public job postings. Hundreds apply, but only a few make it through.
Even today, you can visit the Mossad website, and they welcome your interest. But they advise you to think carefully about which computer you're using to access their site. According to studies, out of 1,000 applicants, only one is accepted.
Modern intelligence agencies are often criticized for their unprecedented and bold actions in foreign countries. When it comes to the safety and security of Israeli citizens, agents never ask for permission. They simply arrive, do the job, and disappear without a trace. In response to the criticism, the 10th director of Mossad, Meir Dagan, once said, "Mossad is an intelligence agency, not the second Ministry of Foreign Affairs."